My name is Madison Clark, and I'm 28 years old. On what should have been the happiest day of my life, I discovered my entire family had orchestrated the most devastating betrayal imaginable. While I stood at the altar in my wedding dress, my parents had secretly booked my younger sister Emma a first-class ticket to Paris as a graduation gift, using the money they'd promised for my honeymoon. The woman who raised me, supported me, and truly celebrated my achievements wasn't my biological mother at all. Hey everyone, before we dive into this absolutely wild family drama that'll have your jaw on the floor, I need to know, where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below. And if you're ready for a story about family betrayal that makes those revenge Reddit posts look tame, smash that like button and hit subscribe, because this tale of family karma is going to blow your mind. Trust me, you won't see this twist coming. Growing up in suburban Connecticut, I always knew Emma was the favorite. She was 3 years younger, blonde, where I was brunette, outgoing, where I was studious, and somehow everything she touched turned to gold in our parents' eyes. While I maintained a 4 gigapascals throughout high school and college, working part-time jobs to help with expenses, Emma coasted through with C's and B's, spending her weekends at parties and shopping with friends. Our parents, Robert and Patricia Clark, owned a successful accounting firm. They weren't wealthy by Connecticut standards, but comfortable enough to afford nice things for Emma. When she wanted a car for her 16th birthday, they bought her a brand new Honda Civic. When I turned 16 2 months later, they handed me the keys to Dad's old pickup truck and said I should be grateful for reliable transportation. The pattern continued through college. Emma got into a mediocre state school and they paid her full tuition, room and board without question. Meanwhile, I'd earned a partial scholarship to a prestigious university, but they made me take out student loans for the remaining costs. It builds character, Dad said. Emma needs more support to succeed. I tried not to let it bother me. I told myself that maybe they were right. Maybe Emma did need more help. Maybe I was just naturally more capable of handling things on my own. I threw myself into my studies, graduated summa cum laude with a degree in engineering, and landed a great job at a tech company in Boston. Emma, meanwhile, had switched majors 3 times, taken 6 years to graduate with a communications degree, and was living back at home, working part-time at a boutique while figuring out her path. Yet somehow, she was still the star of every family gathering, regaling everyone with stories about her creative journey and her plans to travel and find herself. When I announced my engagement to David, a wonderful man I'd met through work, I expected things might finally change. This was a major milestone. Their daughter was getting married. Surely this would be my moment to shine, my chance to be the center of attention for once. I was wrong. The moment I showed them my engagement ring, Mom's first question was whether Emma could be the maid of honor. When I mentioned we were planning a small ceremony to keep costs reasonable, Dad suggested we should think bigger since Emma loves parties and this might inspire her to settle down too. Every wedding planning conversation somehow became about Emma. When we looked at venues, Mom worried whether Emma would like the decor. When we discussed the guest list, Dad insisted we invite Emma's college friends to make sure she has fun. When I picked my dress, Mom's only comment was that the color would wash out Emma's complexion in photos. The final straw came 3 weeks before the wedding. I was having lunch with my parents to finalize the last details when they casually mentioned they had a little surprise for Emma. "We've decided to send Emma to Paris for a month," Mom said, beaming. "She's been so down lately about not finding her passion, and we thought a trip to Europe might inspire her." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. "Paris? When?" "Right after your wedding," Dad said. "We found this amazing cultural immersion program. It's exactly what she needs." I set down my fork carefully. "How much does something like that cost?" They exchanged glances. "Well, it's a bit expensive," Mom admitted. "But Emma's happiness is priceless." How much? I pressed. "About $8,000, Dad said quietly. My blood ran cold. $8,000. The exact amount they'd promised to contribute to our honeymoon. The trip David and I had been planning for months, the one we'd had to scale back because we couldn't afford the places we really wanted to visit. "What about our honeymoon fund?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Another exchanged glance. "Well, honey, you and David both have good jobs," Mom said. "You can save up for a nice trip later. This is Emma's only chance for something like this." I stared at them, feeling like I was seeing strangers. "You're taking the money you promised me to send my sister on a vacation." "It's not a vacation, it's an investment in her future," Dad said defensively. "Besides, you're successful already. You don't need our help anymore." That night I called David in tears. He was furious, not just about the money but about the principle. "They're doing this 3 weeks before our wedding," he said. "Madison, this is insane. Your own parents are prioritizing your sister's whims over your wedding." I knew he was right, but what could I do? The wedding was planned, the deposits were paid, and frankly, I was tired of fighting for scraps of my parents' attention and affection. I'd learned to expect disappointment from them. What I didn't expect was to discover that everything I thought I knew about my family was a lie. The morning of my wedding, I woke up in my childhood bedroom feeling more anxious than excited. Emma had been in Paris for exactly 12 hours, having left the night before with tearful hugs from our parents and promises to send pictures of everything for me to see when I got back from my scaled-down honeymoon. Mom was bustling around the house, but something felt off. She seemed nervous, distracted, constantly checking her phone. When I asked if everything was okay, she just said she was excited about the big day. Dad was even stranger. He kept looking at me with this odd expression like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. When I caught him staring during breakfast, he just mumbled something about being proud and hurried out of the room. The getting ready process felt surreal. My bridesmaids were chattering excitedly, my hair and makeup artist were working their magic, but Mom kept stepping out to take phone calls. "Just coordinating with the caterers," she'd say when she came back in, but her voice sounded strained. It wasn't until I was putting on my dress that I noticed Mom crying. "Mom, what's wrong?" I asked, alarmed. "Are you okay?" She wiped her eyes quickly. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just emotional." "You look so beautiful." But something in her voice made me stop. In 28 years, I'd never seen my mother cry at a happy occasion. She'd been dry-eyed at my high school graduation, my college graduation, even when I got my first job. But now, watching me put on my wedding dress, she was falling apart. "Mom, seriously, what's going on?" She started to say something, then stopped. Her phone rang again. This time, when she looked at the caller ID, her face went white. "I have to take this," she said, practically running from the room. I followed her, my wedding dress rustling, and pressed my ear to the door. I could only catch fragments of the conversation, but what I heard made my blood freeze. "Can't tell her today. Not now. She deserves to know the truth. Emma doesn't understand. All these years." When she came back in, I was standing there in my wedding dress staring at her. "Who was that?" I demanded. "Madison, honey, we need to focus on your wedding right now." "Who was that, Mom?" She looked at me for a long moment and I saw something crumble in her expression. "It was your Aunt Helen." Aunt Helen, Dad's sister who lived in California. The woman who'd always been kind to me but kept her distance from the family. The woman who'd sent me birthday cards with long, heartfelt notes that always seemed a little too personal, a little too knowing. "Why was Aunt Helen calling and why were you crying?" Mom sat down heavily on my bed, still in her mother of the bride dress. "Madison, there are some things. Some things we should have told you a long time ago." My heart started pounding. "What kind of things?" She looked at me with tears streaming down her face. "Helen isn't just your aunt, sweetheart. She's your mother." What, your biological mother, Mom whispered. Helen is your biological mother. I stared at her, my brain refusing to process the words. That's not possible. Helen was 17 when she had you. Unmarried, no resources, no support from your biological father. She begged us to adopt you, to give you the life she couldn't provide. The room was spinning. I sat down hard on my childhood desk chair. You adopted me, we'd been trying to have children for years, Mom continued the words, pouring out now like she'd been holding them back for decades. When Helen came to us pregnant and scared, it seemed like a miracle. We could give you everything. A stable home, two parents' opportunities Helen couldn't provide at 17. But Emma, I started. Emma is our biological daughter. She was born 3 years after we adopted you. 3 years. 3 years of being their daughter, their only daughter, before Emma came along and changed everything. Did Emma know? I whispered. Mom nodded miserably. We told her when she turned 18. We thought she was old enough to handle it maturely. When she turned 18, I was 21 at the time. You told my younger sister about my adoption before you told me we were planning to tell you both together, but Emma, she reacted badly. She said it explained why she always felt like you were different, why you seemed more, what, more driven, more independent. She said it made sense, that you weren't really her sister. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. She said that, Madison, we never meant for it to affect how we treated you. We love you just as much as Emma. But even as she said it, we both knew it was a lie. The preferential treatment, the constant prioritization of Emma's needs over mine, the way they'd always made me feel like I had to earn their love while Emma received it unconditionally. It all made horrible sense now. Aunt Helen, I said slowly. She's been watching me my whole life, hasn't she? All those birthday cards, all those long letters asking about my achievements, my job, my life. Mom nodded. She's so proud of you, Madison. She calls us all the time asking about you. When we told her about the Paris trip for Emma using your honeymoon money, she was furious, I finished. She was heartbroken, Mom corrected. She said we were still treating you like a second-class daughter after all these years. She threatened to tell you the truth herself if we didn't. I sat there, in my wedding dress 30 minutes before I was supposed to walk down the aisle, learning that my entire life had been built on a lie, that the woman I'd called Mom for 28 years had been lying to me every single day, that my sister had known the truth for a decade and hadn't said a word, that somewhere in California my real mother had been watching from a distance as her biological daughter was treated like an afterthought by the people who'd promised to love her. I have to call Helen, I said. Madison, your wedding, I have to call my mother. I locked myself in my childhood bathroom, still wearing my wedding dress, and dialed the number Mom had written down for me with shaking hands. It rang once, twice, and then I heard a voice I'd known my whole life but was now hearing with completely new ears. Madison, Aunt Helen, my mother, said her voice thick with emotion. Oh, honey, I'm so sorry you had to find out this way. Helen, I started then stopped. I don't know what to call you. Call me whatever feels right, she said softly. I've been Helen to you for 28 years. That doesn't have to change. But everything had changed. I was sitting in my wedding dress talking to my biological mother for the first time, as my mother and I felt like the ground had disappeared beneath me. Why didn't you ever tell me? I asked. Oh, sweetheart, she said, and I could hear her crying. I wanted to so many times, but Robert and Patricia, they made me promise. They said it would confuse you, that it would hurt you to know you were adopted. They convinced me it was better for everyone if we kept it a secret. But you've been watching me my whole life, haven't you? Every day, she whispered. Every single day. I have newspaper clippings of your academic achievements, photos Robert would send me of your graduations, copies of every report card. When you got your engineering degree, I cried for 3 days. I was so proud. I was crying now too, mascara probably running down my cheeks, and Emma knew. Helen's voice hardened. Emma has known since she was 18. And Madison, honey, the way she's treated you since then. The things she's said to Robert and Patricia about you not being real family, it's broken my heart. What things? Helen was quiet for a moment. Are you sure you want to know this? On your wedding day, I need to know. She told them that since you weren't really their daughter, they shouldn't feel obligated to treat you the same way they treat her. She said you were basically like a foster child who'd overstayed their welcome. She's the one who convinced them to use your honeymoon money for her Paris trip. I felt like I was going to be sick. My sister, half-sister, had actively lobbied against me, had convinced our parents that I deserved less because I wasn't their real daughter. There's more, Helen said gently. Madison, I need you to know that I never stopped wanting to be your mother. I gave you up because I thought Robert and Patricia could give you a better life than a 17-year-old single mother could. But I never stopped loving you, and I never stopped regretting that decision. Helen, I'm successful now, honey. I'm a pediatric nurse practitioner. I have my own practice, a beautiful home, financial stability. I've spent the last 10 years wanting to reach out to you, wanting to have a real relationship with you, but I didn't want to disrupt your life. I thought about all those birthday cards with the long, heartfelt messages, all those questions about my life, my dreams, my achievements. She hadn't been asking as an interested aunt. She'd been asking as a proud mother who couldn't openly claim her daughter. I want to meet you, I said suddenly. I want to know my real mother. Oh, Madison, she said, sobbing now. I would love nothing more. But honey, it's your wedding day. David is waiting for you. Don't let Robert and Patricia's mistakes ruin this day for you. She was right, but everything felt different now. How could I walk down the aisle, smile for photos, and pretend everything was normal when I'd just learned my entire life was a lie? Do you know what the worst part is? I said. It's not that they adopted me. It's not even that they lied to me for 28 years. It's that they've spent my entire life making me feel like I was less important, less loved, less worthy than Emma. And now I know why. I was never really their daughter in their eyes. I was just the practice round before their real daughter came along. That's not true, Madison. You are just as worthy of love as Emma. More so, honestly, given the kind of person you've become despite how they've treated you. There was a knock on the bathroom door. Madison, it was David's voice. Your mom said you needed a minute, but we're supposed to start in 15 minutes. I looked at myself in the mirror. My makeup was ruined, my eyes were red and swollen, and I was sitting on the bathroom floor in my wedding dress talking to my biological mother for the first time. Helen, I said quietly, I need to ask you something and I need you to be honest. Of course. If I came to California after my honeymoon, would you want to have a relationship with me? A real relationship as mother and daughter, Madison, she said, her voice breaking. That's all I've wanted for 28 years. I made a decision then that would change everything. Then that's what we'll do. But first I need to get through this wedding. And I need to figure out how I'm going to handle Robert and Patricia going forward. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that they've spent my entire life teaching me that actions have consequences, I said, standing up and looking at myself in the mirror. It's time they learned that lesson themselves. There was another knock. Madison, we really need to go, David called. I have to go, I told Helen, but this conversation isn't over. Not by a long shot. I love you, sweetheart, she said. I've loved you every day of your life and I'm so proud of the woman you've become. I hung up the phone, touched up my makeup as best I could and opened the bathroom door. David was standing there in his tuxedo looking concerned and handsome and completely unaware that his bride had just learned her entire life was a lie. "Are you okay?" he asked, taking my hands. "You look like you've been crying." "I have been crying," I said. "But not about marrying you. David, there's something I need to tell you, but not right now. Right now, I need to marry the man I love and then figure out what I'm going to do about my family." He searched my face. "Is everything really okay?" "No," I said honestly, "but it will be. After today, everything is going to be different." And I meant it. As I walked down that aisle with Robert's arm linked through mine, the man I'd called Dad for 28 years but who had never truly claimed me as his daughter, I wasn't just walking toward my new life with David. I was walking toward a reckoning that was 28 years in the making. The wedding was beautiful. I smiled, I laughed, I danced, and I played the part of the happy bride perfectly. But the entire time I was planning how I would confront my parents, planning how I would build a relationship with my real mother, planning how I would make sure that Emma and my parents understood exactly what their years of favoritism and lies had cost. They thought they could keep treating me like a second-class family member forever. They were about to learn how wrong they were. David and I flew to Costa Rica for our honeymoon, a beautiful but modest trip that we'd had to scale back significantly after my parents borrowed our honeymoon fund for Emma's Parisian adventure. The first 3 days I tried to focus on enjoying our time together, but the weight of what I'd learned was crushing me. On the fourth night, as we sat on the beach watching the sunset, I finally told David everything. About the adoption, about Helen being my biological mother, about Emma knowing for years and using it against me, about the systematic favoritism that suddenly made horrible sense. David listened in stunned silence. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time, just holding my hand and staring out at the ocean. "I always knew something was off about how your family treated you," he said finally. "But this, Madison, this is so much worse than I imagined." "The worst part is feeling like such an idiot," I said. "All those years of trying so hard to earn their love, thinking if I just achieved enough, worked hard enough, was perfect enough, maybe they'd see me the way they saw Emma. And the whole time they'd already decided I wasn't really their daughter." "You're not an idiot," David said firmly. "You were a child who deserved to be loved unconditionally by the people who raised you. The fact that they failed at that says everything about them and nothing about you." That night I called Helen again. We talked for 2 hours, really talked for the first time in my life. She told me about her life, about the successful practice she'd built, about how she'd never married because she'd spent all her emotional energy loving a daughter she couldn't claim. She told me about watching from afar, as I achieved everything she'd dreamed I could achieve, and about her heartbreak every time Robert and Patricia would casually mention how Emma was struggling or needed more support. "I've been putting money aside for years," Helen admitted. "Every year on your birthday, I'd make a deposit into a savings account. I told myself that someday, when you knew the truth, maybe I could help you with something important. A house down payment, or graduate school, or a proper honeymoon," I suggested, and she laughed. "Or a proper honeymoon," she agreed. "Madison, I know this is probably premature and I know you need time to process everything, but would you and David like to extend your trip? I'd love to send you somewhere amazing, somewhere you've always wanted to go." The offer was tempting, but I had other plans. "Actually, Helen, there's somewhere else I'd rather use that money." "Oh, I want to come visit you in California. I want David to meet his real mother-in-law. And I want to plan exactly how I'm going to handle Robert, Patricia, and Emma when I get back home." Helen was quiet for a moment. "Madison, honey, I understand you're angry. You have every right to be angry. But don't do anything you'll regret." "I won't regret making them face the consequences of their choices," I said. "They've spent 28 years treating me like a consolation prize, and Emma has spent the last 10 years actively working against me. It's time for some accountability. When we got back from Costa Rica, I didn't go home to Boston right away. Instead, David and I flew to San Diego, where Helen lived in a beautiful craftsman house with a garden that took my breath away. Meeting her as my mother was surreal and wonderful and heartbreaking all at once. She looked like an older version of me. Same dark hair, same green eyes, same stubborn chin. When she hugged me at the airport, I understood for the first time what it felt like to be truly unconditionally loved by a parent. Her house was filled with evidence of a love that had never wavered. Photo albums with pictures of me that Robert and Patricia had sent over the years, newspaper clippings of my academic achievements, a framed copy of my college graduation announcement, a folder thick with the birthday cards I'd sent her over the years. Cards addressed to Aunt Helen that she'd treasured like love letters. I kept everything she said, tears in her eyes, every single thing. You've been the center of my world for 28 years, even when I couldn't tell you. David was amazing through all of it. He charmed Helen immediately, and I could see how happy it made her to know that I'd married someone who truly valued me. Over dinner the first night, she told us stories about my early childhood that Robert and Patricia had never shared. How precocious I'd been, how I'd started reading at 3, how I'd always been curious about everything. They always made it sound like I was a serious, boring child, I said. You were serious but not boring, Helen corrected. You were thoughtful, intelligent, determined. You had this way of studying everything around you like you were trying to figure out how the world worked. Robert used to call you Little Professor when you were 3 years old. It was the first time I'd ever heard that I'd brought my parents joy as a child. Robert and Patricia had always talked about my childhood like I'd been a good but unremarkable kid, while Emma's childhood stories were full of laughter and delight and pride. We stayed in San Diego for a week and every day felt like a gift. Helen and I had 28 years of mother-daughter relationship to catch up on, and David got to see me be someone's cherished daughter for the first time. Helen wanted to know everything about my life, my work, my dreams, my fears. She listened to every story with the kind of rapt attention I'd never gotten from Robert and Patricia. But the week also gave me time to plan. Helen had raised me to believe in justice even if she'd had to do it from a distance through birthday cards and letters. Now it was time for some justice of my own. I'm going to tell them I know I announced over breakfast on our last day. Tell them how much you know, Helen asked carefully. Everything I said. About the adoption, about Emma knowing about how they've been treating me differently because they never really saw me as their daughter. And I'm going to tell them that their relationship with me going forward depends entirely on how they handle this conversation. Helen reached across the table and took my hand. Madison, I support whatever you decide to do. You're my daughter and I trust your judgment. Just remember that you can't control how they react. You can only control how you respond. David squeezed my other hand. Whatever happens, we're in this together. I looked at my real mother and my husband, the two people who loved me unconditionally, and I felt stronger than I'd ever felt in my life. It was time to go home and have a very overdue conversation with the people who had raised me. We flew back to Boston on a Sunday, and I called my parents that evening to arrange a family meeting. I didn't tell them why, just that it was important and that Emma needed to be there too. Emma's still in Paris, Mom protested. Can't this wait until she gets back? No, I said firmly. This has waited long enough. Emma can join us by video call. There was something in my tone that must have convinced her not to argue. We arranged to meet at their house Tuesday evening. David offered to come with me for support, but I knew this was something I needed to do alone. 28 years of being the accommodating daughter, the one who didn't rock the boat, the one who accepted whatever scraps of attention they threw my way. All of that ended now. I arrived at 7 p.m. sharp. Robert and Patricia were sitting at the kitchen table looking nervous, and Emma's face filled the laptop screen between them. She looked tanned and relaxed, clearly having a wonderful time in Paris, on what should have been my honeymoon money. Madison, Emma chirped from the screen. How was Costa Rica? Did you love it? It was fine, I said, taking a seat across from them, though it would have been nice to afford the trip we actually wanted. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Emma's smile faltered slightly. So I continued. I thought it was time we had an honest family conversation. About honesty, actually. And about what it means to be family. Robert cleared his throat. Madison, if this is about the Paris money, it's not about the money, Dad, I said and watched him wince at the word dad. Well, not entirely. It's about 28 years of lies. Patricia went pale. Emma looked confused on the screen. I know about the adoption, I said simply. The silence that followed was deafening. Emma's face on the screen went through several emotions, surprise, calculation, and then something that looked almost like relief. Madison, honey, Patricia started. We can explain. I'm not done, I said, and my voice was steel. I know about the adoption. I know that Helen is my biological mother. I know that Emma has known the truth for 10 years and has been using it against me. And I know exactly why you've treated me like a second-class daughter my entire life. Emma found her voice first. Madison, that's not fair. Fair, I laughed, and it wasn't a pleasant sound. Let's talk about fair, Emma. Is it fair that you convinced our parents to use my honeymoon money to send you to Paris? Is it fair that you've known I was adopted for 10 years and never once mentioned it? Is it fair that you've spent the last decade telling Mom and Dad that I'm not real family and therefore don't deserve equal treatment? Emma's mouth fell open. How did you? Helen told me, I said. My real mother told me. You know, the woman who's been watching from California while the people who promised to raise me as their own treated me like a consolation prize. Robert finally spoke up. Madison, that's not true. We love you just as much. Bullshit, I said, and they all flinched. I never swore, never raised my voice, never made scenes. Good adopted Madison was always polite and grateful. If you loved me just as much as Emma, you wouldn't have taken my honeymoon money to fund her European vacation. If you loved me just as much, you wouldn't have told Emma about my adoption before telling me. If you loved me just as much, you wouldn't have spent 28 years making me feel like I had to earn what you gave Emma for free. Tears were streaming down Patricia's face. Madison, we were trying to protect you. From what? From knowing that my biological mother loves me, from knowing that someone has been proud of me my entire life, from knowing that there's a woman in California who kept every newspaper clipping of my achievements because she was so proud to be my mother. Emma's voice came from the laptop, small and defensive. Look, Madison, I'm sorry if you feel like I turned to stare at her face on the screen. Emma, let me be very clear about something. You're not my sister. We share no blood and frankly we share no values. You've spent the last 10 years actively working to undermine me in our parents' eyes and you've succeeded. Congratulations. That's not true, Emma protested. I never. You told them I wasn't real family, I said quietly. You convinced them that since I was adopted they didn't owe me the same treatment they gave you. You lobbied for my honeymoon money to fund your vacation. So let's not pretend you're innocent in this. I turned back to Robert and Patricia. And you too. You made a promise to Helen when you adopted me. You promised to love me as your own daughter, and maybe for the first 3 years you did. But the moment Emma was born, I became a second-class citizen in this family. Madison, that's not. Robert started. It is, I said firmly, and here's what's going to happen now. I'm done pretending this family dynamic is normal. I'm done accepting scraps of affection and attention. I'm done being grateful for less than I deserve. Patricia was sobbing now. Madison, please, I'm not finished, I continued. Emma, you're going to pay me back for the Paris trip. Every penny. I don't care if it takes you 5 years. That was my money for my honeymoon and you took it knowing exactly what you were doing. Emma's face on the screen was red with anger. You can't be serious, dead serious. And until that money is repaid, don't expect to see me at family gatherings. Don't expect wedding invitations, baby shower invitations, birthday party invitations. You want to act like I'm not real family, fine. I'll treat you like the stranger you've decided I am. I turned back to Robert and Patricia. As for you two, here's how this is going to work. You're going to call Helen and apologize for 28 years of keeping me from my real mother. You're going to acknowledge that you failed in your promise to treat me as your daughter. And you're going to start treating me with the same respect and consideration you've always given Emma, or you're going to lose me entirely. The room was silent except for Patricia's crying. I'm not asking you to choose between me and Emma, I said more softly. But I am telling you that I won't accept less than I deserve anymore. I have a real mother now, one who's proud of me, one who loves me unconditionally, one who's been cheering me on from the sidelines for 28 years. I don't need parents who see me as a burden or an obligation. Robert finally found his voice. Madison, you're our daughter. No, I said, standing up. I'm Helen's daughter. You've made that very clear over the years. I was just the practice round before your real daughter came along. I headed toward the door, then turned back one last time. I'll be expecting a call from Emma about a payment plan for the Paris money. And I'll be expecting calls from both of you when you're ready to apologize for 28 years of treating me like I was less important than your biological daughter. Until then, don't contact me. I walked out of that house feeling lighter than I had in years. Behind me, I could hear Patricia wailing and Emma's voice from the laptop shrill with indignation. For the first time in my life, I had stood up for myself. For the first time in my life, I had demanded the respect I deserved. And it felt amazing. 6 months have passed since that confrontation, and the fallout has been exactly what I expected, and better than I could have hoped for. Emma was furious about my demand for repayment, but when her Parisian adventure ended and she came home to face reality, she quickly realized I wasn't bluffing. She tried to get Robert and Patricia to intervene, but something had shifted in them after our conversation. Maybe it was guilt, or maybe it was the realization that they were about to lose their adopted daughter entirely, but they told Emma she needed to take responsibility for her actions. She's been paying me back $50 a month from her part-time job, which means it'll take her 13 years to repay the $8,000. I could have demanded more, but I wanted the payments to last long enough that she'd remember exactly why she was making them. Every month when she writes that check, she'll remember that actions have consequences. Robert and Patricia did call Helen to apologize, though, according to Helen, it was more of a defensive explanation than a genuine apology. But it was a start. They also called me after 2 weeks of silence, asking if we could work things out. I told them I was open to rebuilding our relationship, but only if they were willing to acknowledge how their favoritism had affected me and commit to doing better going forward. The holidays were interesting. For the first time ever, I didn't automatically accept their invitation for Christmas dinner. Instead, I told them I'd be spending Christmas in California with Helen. My first Christmas with my real mother. The panic in Patricia's voice when she realized I wasn't coming was telling. But Emma will be so disappointed, she said. And we always do Christmas as a family. Then, Emma should have thought about that before she lobbied to steal my honeymoon money, I replied. And as for family, I'll be with my family. Helen is my mother, remember. I did eventually agree to join them for New Year's Eve, but only because David and I were planning to announce some exciting news. Helen had not only paid for an amazing delayed honeymoon to Italy for us, but she'd also connected me with some colleagues in California who were looking for someone with my engineering background. We've decided to move to San Diego, I announced over dinner. I've been offered a position with a medical device company there, and David can work remotely. The silence was deafening. Finally, Patricia whispered, "You're moving across the country." "I'm moving closer to my mother," I corrected. Helen and I have 28 years of mother-daughter relationship to make up for. I want to be near her. Emma, still nursing her resentment over the repayment plan, couldn't resist a dig. So you're just abandoning your family here? I looked at her across the table. This woman who'd shared my childhood but never my struggles, who'd been given everything I'd had to fight for, who'd known the truth about my parentage for years and used it as a weapon against me. I'm not abandoning anyone, I said calmly. I'm prioritizing the people who've prioritized me. Helen has loved me unconditionally for 28 years, even when she couldn't claim me. She deserves to have her daughter close by. The move to California has been everything I hoped for and more. Helen and I have coffee together every Sunday morning, and she comes to our house for dinner every Wednesday. We're making up for lost time, sharing all the mother-daughter moments we missed. She was the first person I called when David and I found out I was pregnant, and she cried with joy for 20 minutes. She's already planning to be the most involved grandmother in history, and for the first time in my life, I know what it feels like to be someone's priority. Robert and Patricia have tried to maintain a relationship with me, but it's different now. There's no more automatic assumption that I'll drop everything for family emergencies or events. There's no more taking my presence for granted. They have to work for my time and attention now, just like everyone else. Emma continues to resent the new family dynamic, especially since my absence has put more pressure on her to be the perfect daughter. Without me there as a convenient comparison point, Robert and Patricia have started expecting more from her. She recently complained to me that they're pressuring her to get a real job and stop depending on them financially. Welcome to my entire childhood, I told her. The difference is I was expected to be independent and grateful for it. You're being asked to be independent and you're acting like it's a punishment. The truth is I don't hate Emma anymore. I don't hate Robert and Patricia either, but I don't owe them anything, and I'm finally free from the exhausting cycle of trying to earn love that should have been given freely. Helen and I talk almost every day now, and she often tells me how proud she is of the woman I've become. You turned out exactly like I hoped you would, she said recently. Strong, independent, successful kind. You did that despite how they treated you, not because of it. She's right. I spent 28 years thinking I needed to be perfect to earn my parents' love, but the truth is I was always worthy of love exactly as I was. Helen knew that even when she couldn't tell me. David knows that. And now finally I know it too. You know what's funny about family karma? Sometimes it takes decades to come full circle, but when it does, the justice is perfect. Emma thought she could use my adoption against me to secure her position as the favorite daughter. Instead, she ended up losing me as a sister and gaining a monthly reminder of how her greed and manipulation cost her a relationship with someone who would have supported her unconditionally. Robert and Patricia thought they could keep me in the dark about my parentage, forever treating me as lesser while making me grateful for scraps. Instead, they lost their daughter to the very woman they'd tried to keep me from, and now they have to watch from across the country as Helen gets to be the grandmother they'll barely know. And Helen, who gave me up at 17 thinking she could never give me what I needed, got her daughter back at 45 and discovered that I'd turned out better than any of us could have imagined. Sometimes the universe does balance the scales. Sometimes justice isn't immediate or obvious, but it's inevitable. And sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply living well, choosing the people who choose you and refusing to accept less than you deserve. Speaking of justice and family karma, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever discovered something that completely changed how you saw your family? Have you ever had to cut ties with people who didn't value you? How did you handle finding out that your life wasn't what you thought it was? Drop your stories in the comments below. I read every single one, and your experiences might help someone else going through something similar. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you that you deserve to be someone's priority, hit that like button and let me know. And please subscribe for more real-life stories about family drama, justice served, and the satisfaction of choosing yourself. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that they don't have to accept being treated as less than their worth. Thank you for listening to my story, for supporting my journey, and for believing that everyone deserves to be loved unconditionally. I hope that whatever family challenges you're facing, you find the courage to demand the respect you deserve and the wisdom to know when it's time to walk away. Remember, you can't choose the family you're born into, but you can choose the family you keep. Choose the people who celebrate your successes, support your dreams, and love you exactly as you are. Life's too short to spend it begging for love from people who should give it freely. Until next time, keep choosing yourself and keep believing that justice, even when it's delayed, is always worth waiting for.